Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Niklas, and as Marie said, I'm a director of product management at Orange Cyberdefense. And together with my team, I'm responsible for our detection and response services, threat intelligence, and exposure management. And in my presentation today, I would like to talk with you a little bit about how exactly these three elements come together to build the future of managed detection and response services with what we call the modern SOC. So before we dive a little bit deeper into why do we need to shift to the modern SOC and how does a modern SOC look like, let's quickly look at a couple of things that we already achieve today with our managed detection and response services. So one of the key reasons why detection and response matters is because we want to intercept attackers before they can have any impact on any of the three core principles of the CIA triad, right? And when we look at our data, this is what we see, right? Out of the incidents that we see that are true positives, we see that over 80% of these incidents, we stop before they have any impact on either your confidentiality, integrity, or availability. And what really matters to achieve that is time, right? Time is of the essence, being quick, being faster than the attacker. And that is also what we see in our data already today. We are quite fast in doing that. In average, we respond in less than 15 minutes to incidents that we detect. However, the big challenge that comes along with this, to achieve this, is to always be on top of what is going on in the threat landscape, right? Understanding what we actually have in front of us. And that is where our threat intelligence comes in. We utilize our threat intelligence to give the right context of the threat landscape and what is going on to our analysts. And when we compare our threat intelligence to other feeds that we see in the market, we see that on one side, we are faster in finding new threats. And on the other side, if we compare it to what else we see and others see, we see that we have quite some exclusive knowledge. We usually see a little more of what is going on. And we will dive a little bit deeper into why that is as well later. However, we see that the threat landscape and also your environments are changing quite quickly. And what that means is, if we want to continue achieving these numbers, or maybe even be faster, be better, respond to even more or intercept even more incidents in the future before they have an impact, we need to change. That means we really need to shift the paradigm of what we do with threat detection. And that is what we're going to talk about today. How can we shift the paradigm in detection and response to achieve better results? And if we look at why is that needed, why do we need to shift the paradigm? We clearly see that everything is changing. Everything is changing and it's going faster and we see more change. Let's say you're moving from a data center to a cloud environment, right? You need to have a lot of things on top of your mind. But it also means for detection and response that you need to collect different data, you need to collect more data. So with every change you introduce, you need different data, and more data leads to more to more incidents, which means you would need more people, more resources in order to deal with what you have in front of you. In other words, that means we're trying to do too much. And that usually comes with a lack of understanding what actually really matters. It comes with a lack of understanding what does my attack surface look like, what are the risks that I'm actually trying to remediate. So why we need to shift the paradigm is, as we said, the threat landscape is changing rapidly. We see that the attack surface or the threat landscape is sophisticating and always changing quicker and quicker. What that means, a fixed or static strategy for detection and response is not good enough anymore. because you always need to adapt to what is going on. That means you need to have a dynamic and agile approach to shape what you actually look for. So your threat detection strategy needs to be agile enough to quickly change, as quickly as the threat landscape changes. Then not only the attackers are changing constantly, you are changing as well, right? You are changing constantly and continuously how you are exposed to that threat landscape. And that means your attack surface is changing all the time. And what that means is you first of all need to understand what does that attack surface actually look like. What am I actually trying to protect from being compromised? And this is exactly this, focus, right? As I said before, lack of focus means what are we actually looking for? It's difficult if I can't grasp of what does my attack surface look like. So how would I have a dynamic detection strategy if I don't know what my attack surface looks like? And then, of course, the main purpose is to try and be faster, try to remediate the threats before they have an impact. So building quick response capabilities. But at the same time, we are all challenged by limited resources, right? I guess nobody has unlimited resources, whether that's budget, people, compute power, whatever, right? We are all limited. So we need to be smarter in the way how we use the resources. And that on one side means we need to try and avoid and be proactive that it comes to an incident. Try and already fix the problem before it comes to an incident that I then need to analyze and respond to. So proactivity, but also that's where the big chance of automation and AI lies, right? Using automation and AI to then enable our resources that are limited to look at what really matters. However, we also see that the technology stacks that we find with many of our customers are built over the past years in quite a best-of-breed approach, sticking together single solutions trying to fix a single problem. And that makes it very difficult to achieve that, right? For example, if you then look at how can I bring in AI and automation to be more efficient, that's very difficult if you're relying on a legacy technology stack. And at the same time, we see that our customers are more and more challenged by their management on articulating and clearly defining what is actually the business benefit that I'm bringing. What are the business objectives that I'm contributing to with my detection and response capability, as an example. And that also means being challenged on the investment and the return of investment that you do into detection and response. And that means, well, consolidating and improving your return of investment and your total cost of ownership, but also building a state-of-the-art technology stack that allows to be smarter with what you use. And clearly focusing on the outcomes you want to achieve, because that helps you to articulate what is the benefit and the impact I do on risks. How do I remediate the risks? And that makes it much easier to articulate what is the return of investment and the benefit and the contribution you do to your business. And that is exactly what we see the modern SOC needs to deliver. The shift from being reactive to be much more proactive. And if we look at how we see this modern SOC, what does it bring as key elements? For us, it has 4 key pillars that it is built on. On one side, threat intelligence, right? Gaining that understanding of what does my threat landscape look like. Of course, you want to have a general understanding, but it's more important to understand what are the threats that are relevant to you and to your peers. And then the second pillar is, how am I actually exposed to these threats? And that goes far beyond traditional vulnerabilities, right? That goes into things like, how are my identities configured? How is my cloud environment configured? So it's not only vulnerabilities, it's looking at the entire attack surface, understanding how am I exposed to the threat landscape. And if I'm bringing these two things together, that's on one side quite a lot of data. That's where AI can help doing that correlation. But it also gives me quite important information because it defines my risk. What are the threat actors that are relevant for me, that are targeting me, and how are they doing it? And am I actually exposed to it? Then I can see, is that a valid threat? And that feeds back into my detection and response strategy, right? Do I actually have the right capabilities to detect what is most likely to happen to me? But it also enables me to proactively work on my security posture. Because then I know this is the threat, that's how I'm exposed to it, and if I fix it here, then I remediate the problem before it even comes to an incident. So this is what we see is the modern SOC being built on. So let's dive a little bit deeper into some of these elements and see how we can help you building that modern SOC capability. One of the key elements is threat intelligence. And when we look at our threat intelligence, it is a compilation of over 400 data sources. And of course, we rely on, for example, open source intelligence. We work with partners to build a good basis of data feeds that we all bring together. But what is really interesting is what we put on top as our proprietary data. And that is, as an example, the data we collect in our managed detection and response services. We feed back the sightings from the detection and response services. So if we see something with one of our customers and we detect a new IOC, we feed that back and you directly benefit from it. And then as part of the Orange group, we also get access to quite exclusive telemetry from the network of Orange, right? And that builds up on our threat intelligence that we then use in our managed detection and response services to, on one side, help you get that strategic understanding, that strategic awareness of what is the threat landscape, what are the threats my peers are experiencing, what are the threats that I should be worried about. And then, of course, we use it to give our analysts the information they need to contextualize what they have in front of them, to then be much better and faster in taking the right decisions. Is it an actual threat or is it not? And we use the information to, for example, in your firewalls or preventive measures, proactively already block what shouldn't be in your network. So threat intelligence builds a key pillar. And the second key pillar is exposure management. The question of how am I exposed to the threat landscape? And as I said before, it's not about only traditional software vulnerabilities. It goes beyond that. And we will dive a little bit into that. But it's really an evolution of vulnerability management towards exposure management that we see as relevant in order to help you gaining that context about what does your attack surface look like. So exposure management typically starts with discovery, scoping of what is the parameter that I'm looking at, what are my core risks, and the scenarios that I believe could happen in my environment. And then you start discovering, and that is on one side, external and internal attack surface. If we're looking at the external attack surface, that is where it gets really interesting, right? Because that is where you might find shadow IT, misconfigurations in your cloud environments, things you are not aware of at all. But that is viable information and really valuable information, because if you don't know about it, how would you put that into your detection and response strategy? So we take the external attack surface and then combine it with the information we collect about the internal attack surface. And that can come from various sources, right? Let's take your EDR solution, the EDR agents, as an example. They collect already quite a lot of valuable information about what's going on your endpoints. But then classical vulnerability scanners and other data sources help us to then map out and visualize what does your attack surface look like from an external, so outside-in view, how the attacker sees you, and the inside view. And once we have mapped that out, then we can look at how to prioritize and to validate what's really going on. So we can then see what are the possible attack paths and the exposures in your environment. And of course, we would find traditional software vulnerabilities, right? But the difference is in how you prioritize. You wouldn't only look at the classical CVSS score and then say, well, there is a CVSS 10, I need to fix that. It's much more about finding those points that are choke points in your network, right? Those are the points where an attacker, if compromised this asset, it could really pivot onto critical assets. And is really a critical point in your network because one compromise can be quite severe and have a big impact on your network. So you would rather focus on fixing this misconfiguration than fixing a CVSS 10 that might not lead to anything because it's not on a path to a critical data or critical asset. So the point and the goal of exposure management is really that visualization and understanding of what your attack surface looks like and prioritizing what really matters and fixing that. But it also enables us then to see what are viable attack paths that an attacker could take through my network. And we can validate that with, for example, breach attack simulation or penetration tests to really be sure, yes, this is an attack path that could lead to a compromise of my critical data. And since we are combining that and use that information for detection and response capabilities, beside, of course, telling you there is a critical new vulnerability you should be aware of, this is the exposures that you have, and that's what we recommend you, how you should fix them and remediate them. It also helps you to build the right detection and response capabilities. It validates, do I actually have detections in place to detect that behavior? You can do a threat hunt to see if there is already an attack ongoing in your network that uses this attack path. And of course, as long as you haven't remediated that, you would look much closer if something is going on in your network utilizing this attack path. And that's the dynamic detection and response strategy, right? You look at what is valid, what is most likely to happen, and then you take that information and you say, if there is an incident related to this attack path, I really need to I need to be aware of that and look closer into it because I validated it's a valid path that an attacker would take into my network. And then the proactive part comes, right? It's not enough to just know it's there and I can monitor it and detect it. You want to fix it. So we can help you on the way to fix these remediation or these exposures with the right steps, and by that remediate the entire attack path. So we believe this is where the transformation of the managed detection and response services needs to go. That is where the modern SOC needs to go. But it is a full-blown transformation of how detection and response works. And if we look at how to build the modern SOC, it is a full-on transformation of how you operate detection and response. So let's look at how we built that capability. It starts with a platform that is capable of doing that, bringing all the data together in one place. Not dozens of platforms or best-of-breed solutions that have partially overlapping capabilities and then lack visibility somewhere else. What it requires is a single place where you bring all your visibility and all your detections together. That is a state-of-the-art detection capability in platform. And then automation and AI are helping us to be able to analyze the amount of data that we see. So it helps us to orchestrate and to contextualize the information, to then take the right decisions and be proactive, remediate what we already know needs to be remediated, and help the analysts to have the right information on hand to then take the right decisions. But this is a full-on technology transformation because it requires to have these capabilities. And with most of the legacy technology stacks that we see, this is very difficult, if not impossible, to achieve. So it is a full technology transformation, consolidating all the capabilities you have for detection and response into a single capability, into a single platform that leverages AI and automation. But it is also a full transformation of the services that we put on top. For the analysts, it means to have better information on hand, to have contextualized information, take faster and better decisions, and to have more response actions on hand. And this is, as I mentioned in the beginning, how you can move from 15 minutes or much longer to very short times, because you use automation to do proactive remediations or response actions, and the analyst has the information on hand. He needs to quickly take the right decision. But exposure management is also a crucial part there, because, as we saw before, without having the right context, it's very difficult to take the right decisions. So detection and response services are evolving to a part where they are not only doing detection and response, they are also looking at your attack surface, because this is the information you need to take the right decisions, contextualize, and then be proactive. So beside that it is transforming the operational model, it's also transforming processes. And something we see quite often is traditional MDR services are looking at or validating initial steps and then use quite a lot of your time to get context, to take the right decisions. And the modern SOC uses business context by bringing in the right information of what your attack surface and your assets looks like. Right? This is a fundamental part to then enable automation and AI to take some decisions for us, to provide us with the right context. But what is never possible is that AI and automation can take all the decisions for us, because they can only take the decisions we have brought them and taught them in their models, right? So there will always be incidents where AI or automation is unsure what to do with it. And that is where then the AI augmented analysts come in, right? They are not looking at false positives anymore. They're looking at true positives that AI can't conclude on. So the role is shifting and we go much deeper. Good. Yeah. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Niklas. It's a very interesting topic, and unfortunately we are running out of time, so questions, you will be here. You know you will be in other sessions as well. So yeah, just grab Niklas, and thank you so much.
Thank you.